Hello and welcome to another kind of creation video to support people who might be new to certain areas of the hobby. This one is on the WTC Charging guide, specifically created by them for use for their terrain. It is actually also in use with Green Banner events in the US, so kind of it is spreading in kind of its use. So this will kind of cover how to use the charging guide to hopefully break it down a little bit for people to kind of feel confident when they are playing at events. It is and will be used at my teams events. The one coming up in January, which is sold out, and then there's another one in July, which again will be similar capacity. It might expand slightly, but that will come down to how many people I feel I can comfortably fit within the venue, but who knows. So it's going to go through. There's going to be a fair amount of information. I've tried to bite-size it kind of as much as possible, as well as make it so that it's easy to kind of take in. There will also then be some kind of TTS just going through how it functions. TTS being Tabletop Simulator, if you've not used it. Useful if you like it. Again, very useful for kind of learning movement, especially learning terrain that you may not get to play on all that often if you don't have any UKTC, GW or WTC local to you and you're going to events using it. It gives you an opportunity to kind of play on it without having to buy the terrain, as well as test out models and units and even armies that you don't own or are kind of interested in without shelling out the money to do so, as well as play people all over the world you would not otherwise meet. So first of all, kind of the main rule that's implemented as part of this by the WTC is referenced kind of as much as I'm going to do here. It talks about the barricades and fuel pipes rule in the full document, which I recommend reading. It is quite wordy, hence this video. But again, it's good to make sure that there's nothing you're missing, and there's probably some interactions I'm not going to cover because they are either fringe interactions or they're not kind of going to come up on a general day-to-day basis. So it is kind of basically using the 2-inch rule for engagement, similar to something that GW tried to implement in 9th edition, which was great, but unfortunately it didn't quite have the same way of making sure the interactions were fair, because there was a few things you could do which were a little bit janky, as it were, to kind of use and kind of break and bend the rule as much as possible. So this goes through how it's been implemented in a kind of more robust way. So why does it exist? Generally because in games you have players using effectively the 1-inch again from a rule to stop other opponents' models being able to charge theirs, hence why they've used the walls are treated like barricades, allowing models to fight through the wall with a 2-inch engagement. You then have underneath the WTC kind of version there taken from the document, so again they outline it in a similar way. God, itchy eye. So now it only applies to certain units, specifically, much like I've gone through in or a little bit in the previous video about WTC terrain: infantry beasts, imperial primarchs and Belisarius Cool, as well as potentially the opponent's models. So if you are a Chaos Knights player, it doesn't mean that this rule will never come up for you. You just can't use it. It will only be kind of put upon you, basically. Unless you're running the Chaos Cult detachment and then, you know, go full ham with your Chaos Cultists. It is there to stop... it's in use when you're prevented from legally placing a model within base contact or within an inch, i.e. engagement range. Mandatory placements, it still includes if you are able to legally place a model within 1 inch or base to base, then you don't use this rule. So if legal placement exists, rule can't be used. Fairly straightforward, but That I'm going to kind of repeat that one throughout because it's probably the thing that some people might miss or forget. So as you can see here, we've got some Chaos Legionnaires going to charge, some Space Wolf Intercessors I think I used, that have decided to make themselves 1 inch away from one of those tall WTC ruins. So the Chaos Space Marine player is looking for how they can charge. So basically it's then done after a successful charge roll. Models that cannot fit, i.e. end their move as close as must end their move as close as possible to the wall. You've got tokens that are then involved. Engagement range is then moved to 2 inches for the models that are using a token, and the target unit of the charge also are able to attack models within 2 inches, but only the models with the tokens, so not any model. So just kind of quick overview of the rule. Moving on. So legal position basically is a spot where a model's base sits flat on the table of terrain. The model is in coherency within engagement range, and kind of actually within the distance rolled on the charge. Counterplay. There is a way around this rule. Don't stand an inch away from the wall. Problem solved. If models can fit, then it kind of eradicates the need for this rule. Alternatively, run Chaos Cultists, run Drakari, run any 25mm models, because those models are less than an inch, so you can't ever actually stop them because their models will always fit. So it's something to kind of get your head around. Generally, is actually if you're not standing an inch away from the wall, you won't ever have to use this rule. It's kind of then thinking about potentially threat ranges of opponents and things like that, to basically, as WTC intended, the intended reason for including it is to break up that non-interactivity and kind of the non-engaging standoffs that sometimes happen in games. So that's a way around it. So I've broken this up into kind of the 3 parts of the kind of charge and fight phase. You've got the charge, you've then got fight phase, and then you've got pile and consolidate. So first of all, determine the charge roll would actually mean that you could make a charge. So much like that example with the Chaos Space Marines, they were 5.7 inches away, so if there was no terrain it would be a 5-inch charge, because that would end you within an inch, so engagement range. So boom, perfect. If then every model can fit, you don't need this rule, carry on as normal. If a model can fit in a legal position, they must be moved there first, so you can't block things off. Models that then cannot fit because there's a wall in the way must be moved as close to the wall as possible, and then can also use this rule. Once you've completed moving the models to be either within the as close as possible or within engagement range, you can then mark models that can use the 2-inch engagement range to distinguish them from models in standard combat. So only the models that are using the rule need a token, and it could be a dice, it could be kind of a round object like a 40mm, a small token just to put next to it. Again, if you're going to use dice, make sure they're different to the ones that you're going to also roll, so you don't confuse them. So then when you go into the fight phase, the 2-inch engagement range applies only to models with a token and the specific units they charge, so not every single unit around. Again, we'll go through some examples of how this looks and when and why not it doesn't apply. So you've then got your pile-in. If a model with a token can move into a standard legal position, it must do so. So you can't use the 2-inch rule if there is a way that that model could move to be base to base or in engagement range normally. If you choose not to move it, as a result, you then lose the token, which means it then is not using the rule. So it's then potentially outside of combat, and that's its pile-in. Finally, combat locked. You can't remove tokens if it would cause the unit to no longer be in combat. unless you've got another model in the unit that is already within the normal engagement, following the normal rules. So you can't attack and then just pull yourself out of combat, because that's not fair. So you then have the consolidation and reset, basically the tidy up step. If a model consolidates and can reach the 1 inch legal position, remove the token, done. Now, if you can get in, you can't elect to not move during the consolidation. So if you can get into base-to-base for engagement, you have to. As long as it's at least one token remains, the engagement rule remains in effect for those models / units, both yours and the opponent's. The rule ends immediately once the last token goes. This can happen when all the models are in standard 1 inch range, or something like a heroic intervention or a secondary charge pushes the models into a standard legal position. So you could end up with a unit that's in combat falling out of combat as a result. So again, something we'll go over in kind of the TTS segment that I will do after this, that again you can just kind of look through. This is just a quick checklist. Again, is it an infantry, beast, primarch or cool unit? Do check, and again it's really important that before you roll the dice you have the conversation with your opponent to check that there is no legal way for you to complete the charge normally. Then position, move the models that can fit to within 1 inch normally, move the rest as close to against the wall, then token up. Stick the tokens on the units that can't finish legally within 1 inch but are within 2 inches. Then during the pile and consolidate, if a gap opens up and a model can fit, you must move it and remove the token. So that's kind of very quick overview. Important reminders: if you use this rule to hit your opponent from 2 inches away, they can hit you back. They can hit that model that has a token. When removing tokens during pile end, you can't remove so many that the unit is no longer in engagement. So unless there is a models already within 1 inch, they're kind of stuck. Again, anti-cheese. Basically, if you want to avoid having to use this and giving effectively your opponent extra threat range, you should basically just leave your bases so that people can fit. So going to now pivot to looking at TTS and kind of going through this in various few different setups, showing different models, and looking at kind of how it can be used. So here we have TTS running and working and slowly killing my computer. So sorry, just trying to find the window. So there we go. So here we have that charge from earlier, which, as you can see, I've kind of just marked on these models the kind of 1 inch gap around. As you can see, we have the whole TTS board kind of set up here, and kind of just a few models just to kind of showcase a few different things. So this unit here, they need a 5.7 inch charge. That is the closest that is. So first step is kind of you've checked the charge. Now, because of the, just going to turn the floors off on this ruin again, really useful feature. Can't do this technically in real life because you kind of need them there. So as we can see, he can't fit there without kind of not being flat, basically. So at this point we kind of have to use the rule potentially, unless they roll a 12, and then we don't have to worry about it. So just going to use that because it's going to be easier for me to move the models in a second. So we have our 2 dice, we roll our charge. Here comes either a fail or a 12 probably. There you go, 12. So in this case I've rolled a 12, so I don't maybe need, so that's the furthest he can get to there with basing. This model can base. Even this guy can base. So he's gone 9.4, so we've got 2.6. So even that guy. So we've actually only got the one chosen who comes forward after my 12, who ends up here, who, you know, if this unit was not an inch away from the wall, he would actually be able to have easily made that charge, and in fact probably, if we go this way, he would be able to make that charge, except for one problematic factor. He is actually then outside of coherency, so he cannot go that way. So he ends up coming closer towards the unit because he has to. This is as close as he can get. We are then going to mark him with this lovely token here. It says sticky objectives, but it's just something very quick. So here we have this model marked. So he is now, for intents and purposes, in engagement range of the model, because he has a token. So all of the other models actually are basing, so during the piling step they cannot move, and this model cannot sit without being a wobbly model. So he would actually, have to come to here because coherency still matters. So he is there to keep coherency. So we then have obviously the normal fight step. Now, option 1, you can take the token off of him, and then he can't fight. However, he cannot make a 3-inch pile-in into the unit, so he kind of is stuck with his token. We then have the combat. The chosen probably kill 5 intercessors in combat, which, let's say it goes horribly wrong, and actually they only kill 3 of them, and the chosen get 1 die. Consolidate. So they then consolidate. Because he can now consolidate into a legal position, the token is removed, and it kind of doesn't matter anymore in that regard. So there's one example there. I'll take our chosen out of the way again, just to kind of show you one where you are never going to need to use the rule potentially, but you may end up with kind of some instances where it matters. Over here we have Lilith, who herself, she is on a 32mm base, I believe. And then we have some witches. The witches are one of the few remaining models, aside from Cabalite's Hand of the Archon, Rax, I believe, as well, Succubuses, but not Lilith, because she's had a kind of an upgrade, Chaos Cultists, and a couple of other models. I think Guardsmen, some of them are still on 25mm, and maybe some Genestealer Cult models, Tyranids, I think, as well. As there's a couple that are still on 25s. So there are still some 25s floating around. How long they'll exist for, I don't know. So in this case, let's say we have Lilith, for some reason, is cowering behind. Again, measure of movement is really useful because it makes life easier for my unit to move them. So they're a little bit further away. We have a 6.7, so we need a 6 to be in engagement range. So again, we roll the charge. Now we know it's legal. I rolled a 7. So in this case, these models are going to be able to get into engage range, and because their bases are less than an inch, I don't need to even consider this rule for the charging guide, because of the fact that they're going to fit. They're also infantry, so it's fine. Lilith, then, because I only got a 7, I don't need to worry about the charging rule for her, because she actually wouldn't have made it into engagement range because of or not made it into engagement range because of the wall, because she only rolled a 7, which only got her to the wall. So if we imagine it was an 8, if I go to an 8, she ends up in the wall, but she would, in this case, end up otherwise within engagement range of the unit, because that is a 1-inch bubble. So she would go to here, or effectively anywhere along the wall, and she would get a token as a result if I chose to use the rule with her. However, we then move to the pile-in step, and because she can easily get into base to base, she moves into base to base, the token goes away, and it's then resolved as a result. Right, then we're going to take the intercessors out of the way. We then have a rhino, which is going to be really interesting to try and get it to line up with the wall, because one of the slightly annoying things about TTS is the 15-degree movement is slightly annoying. So I have to suspend some belief because I can't physically turn the model to what I need it to do, unless we also cheat and there we go. If we just cheat and make that 45 degrees, there we go. So we now have a rhino that is an inch away from the wall. The rhino doesn't need to worry about using the rule if charging, because it's not an infantry, a beast, etc. So it doesn't use the rule, so it doesn't actually care. It only cares as a form of reciprocity, and is only affected by it in actually being the target of the rule. So we then have the intercessors. Now, one of them will fit there. So I need to move the model slightly forward. Again, the hitbox on this is not amazing. So that should be an inch. Perfect. So I'm kind of ignoring the little jutty out bits for the purpose of just showcasing the rule. So it is an inch. I cannot fit my intercessor without landing on it, and then I can't be in engagement range as a result with that part of the model. Now, over here, if you've got the Chaos Blades on the model, it is within an inch of the wall. If it doesn't, then you kind of ignore them. I'm going to use them for the purpose of this because I can't turn them off. So we then have the Space Wolves. They are, I love measuring my 6-inch charges. Again, within 7, so they need less than a 7 to make the charge. I never roll this well in real life, so we've succeeded at another charge, because if the wall wasn't here, we'd definitely be able to make it. Now, if a model can make it into base-to-base contact or into engagement range, it has to. So this guy, because I got an 8, well can get into base-to-base. This guy can also do the same. Now, the other 3 models have no way of making it into base to base, so still have to maintain coherency. I still have to be in a legal move. So rest of them then move, and as you can see, their little 1-inch circles don't quite reach. So now we move to the next step of the token phase, and I want all of them to fight because they're only intercessors. They haven't even got actual combat weapons except for one guy with a power fist potentially. So I'm going to give all 3 of those, especially because obviously not that he's equipped with anything because I didn't write the data sheet, but imagining he has a power fist, I definitely want him to be able to hit the rhino. So I've given that there. Now we go to the pile-in step. Even with a 3-inch pile-in, I'm not going to be able to, because this guy could already base. If I'd rolled a slightly lower charge, maybe I'd roll exactly the 7, he would end up in the wall. So he would have been able to do the pile-in, and would have to, because he could legally make a pile-in. And it might have ended up with this guy being able to fit if I'd have tried to move round to maybe block the rhino off or something like that. So we now move to this step. We now go to the fight. Shockingly, a bunch of guys that are wounding on 6s with no AP don't kill the rhino. Now, I can, or if I could, consolidate in, I would have to, and then the token would go away. Because I chose to fight with these guys, they have to keep their token. So the rhino would be able to fight back, and let's say the rhino has a super glorious day, it doesn't fail and kill itself using the dark packs, it gets the sustained, it kills 2 intercessors. Now, I would have to actually make sure that I still have one person in combat. So I could consolidate my Rhino right up to the wall. I've decided I really don't want to lose those intercessors, and then that's now made it a legal engagement, and then the tokens go away. Or the Rhino stays where it is. If it couldn't do that, then it could stay there and the tokens kind of stay in play. But because it can get into engagement range, it kind of has to, so the tokens go away. So the combat there is resolved. But if it couldn't, it would be ongoing, and the Rhino would still continue to use the rule, even though it is not normally subject to the rule, because it can't use it many charges. Again, similar thing, you might have a Armiger or some kind of knight, Warglaive in that case, who is being charged. It's slightly more difficult for this one to be kind of blocking per se, but let's say we are slightly closer, so we're less than 5 inches, so a legal charge would be 5, and let's say we roll exactly a 5. There we go, bonk. Hooray, through the magic of manipulation, I rolled a 5. Now, so this model cannot get to an engagement range because it did not roll far enough. This guy would be able to land in engagement range if it wasn't for this pesky wall. So we kind of need to remember that he was able to make engagement range. And same for this guy, pesky wall getting in the way again, so he's going to come to here, and this guy would also be able to get an engagement range, but is still just clipping the wall. And then this guy isn't able to, but he can get right up to the wall. So these guys again must get flush as close as they can to the wall. So I can then apply the token to the middle 3, because they would have been able to make that into engagement range if the wall didn't exist. So this guy can pile in and he can get into engagement range and he can base, so he's going to. This guy can also make it into engagement range. This guy can, so they have to. The one that didn't have a token had the choice, and although he wouldn't be able to use the token and fight anyway, he still doesn't have to pile in. So there we go. So that guy can also make it in, and this guy can. So although we have applied the token to this unit, it's not actually ended up coming up relevant, because after piling, and being coherent, they're still in a legal position. They're still able to kind of do that one. So now let's imagine after our charge, so we've ended up here, and these guys would have their tokens potentially, but in fact actually the Knights player decided his guy over here was going to heroic, and then heroic in and based this guy here. So he's not quite in engagement range with this guy, but he is with this one. Again, you then have to follow the kind of legal rules for piling consolidate, because they are now engaged. He is closer there, so he would be able to go there. This model is 2.4 from there and 1.2 from there, so he would have to base into there. So again, the tokens still go away. Kind of the knight can't really stop it in that way. So we pull the knights away, and then we'll do it with it's very rare that you have your unit lined up in such a nice straight line in reality. Here we have some legionnaires, or incubi, sorry, not legionnaires, who are again also going to be standing an inch away from the wall. One thing to be very careful of actually is, although kind of here it's like I've annoyingly tried to do something and it's then TTS has done its joy. So here my models have a 1 inch gap in between, and I am an inch away from the wall. So sometimes people might think that they can't be charged because you're like, I'm an inch away from the wall, I'm safe. In this case, the model fits, so I can charge you. So it doesn't. Do be careful that actually you do check that a model can fit, because although someone might say they are an inch away, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be charged. So they would have to be closer together because it just has to block off the model from being able to charge. So we're not quite up against the wall. There we go. So in that regard, we should be now blocking. Oh, God, it's very hard to do. It needs to be closer. Cool. So rather than kind of faffing for ages, for intents and purposes. Oh, there we go. We can't fit a model there now. Perfect. So again, the intercessors are looking to charge. They need a 5. There's the 5. So if the wall wasn't in the way, we would be able to make it into engagement range. So the model is going to come as close to the wall as it can, and in fact the same for everyone, I think, in this case. Yep. So they all come right up to the wall, and then all of them would get their tokens. Oh, apparently an armager is now a token. There we go. Perfect. So that's that there. So we then move into the pile-in. So again, this is where you should have that conversation with your make sure, that you do have a check with your opponent, because although he couldn't during the charge make it into a legal position, he now can actually make it into base-to-base contact with a model. So he would have to pile in to it. Again, just making sure that he still ends up in a legal position. So he's actually 2.3. So there we go. So he is right up against the wall. There we go. So again, something to be very aware of. It's just making coherency still legal. Now, again, similar to for this guy. So he loses. He would then lose the banner because he's then fixed that problem. And then similar for this guy, he would not need a banner because he has made it in. The other 3 would retain. If they kill 3, you would then be able to consolidate in. Everyone would then remain. Let's imagine everyone failed miserably. No one died. When the Space Marines attacked, the AP0 on their combat weapons kind of made it redundant. No one else can make it into a legal position, so the combat would kind of remain like this. And then the Incubi, because they have devs and everything else, might kill a couple. So we pull these 2 out, and then we still remain in this position with the tokens on those, because they are still using that rule. In the Drakari's turn, some witches come and they charge, and they actually can only base these guys. As a result of them now being in a legal position, they are no longer needing the tokens. The witches don't need to worry about it because they've base to based. They also have 25 mil bases, so the rule can be applied against them, but they can never make use of the rule because there's never a way for them to not be in engagement range and or base to base contact because of the size of their base. So now, because of that, the 2 intercessors out here, because they've lost their tokens, they're no longer considered in engagement range with these models, so can only allocate their attacks into the witches. Because this guy's in base to base, he can still allocate his attacks. This would be very similar had that been a heroic. And this is where you can end up with a very weird situation. So the models have made their charge. Let's say there's only the 3 remaining, and all of them have actually kind of got into the position where they are counting as being engagement range because they could have legally made it had that pesky wall not been in the way. The witches have then heroicked, and they've actually come up and ended here. Now, because they are now within engagement range of a unit, it blocks the use of the tokens. So the incubi are now not actually in combat, because no model in the intercessor unit has a token. The incubi unit can't fight. The intercessors actually then turn around and, with weight of attacks and my inability to roll 4-ups, kill the entire of the witch unit. Now, because they don't have the tokens, they don't have to consolidate to make the legal position. However, if you wanted to consolidate into the incubi, this guy is still capable of making it into engagement range to die to 5 incubi. So it is something just to watch out for. Is heroic interventions can cause difficulties for you if you are trying to use this rule, because you might not end up fighting the unit you wanted to. So kind of that's a very quick run through of a few different interactions. Hopefully that's helped in understanding the engagement rule for the charging for WTC terrain. If you have any questions or anything before either one of my events, the Kent events, or in general, do feel free to kind of comment on the video or message me on Facebook, and kind of I will try to help you as best I can. So just very quickly, I realised while doing the TTS aspect, having kind of checked through, I don't think I have incorrectly suggested it, but just really wanted to make this clear, that it is a choice with the consolidating part, not the pile-in. So when making the consolidation moves for models in the unit, if a controlling player wishes to consolidate, and it can go into a legal position or base, it has to. Token goes away. You can elect not to move if you wish, but you then still keep the token. So it's kind of a choice, I guess, in regards to either what benefits you the most, or if it ends up with you then having to engage another unit, might be a time that you don't want to do it, because you don't want to then get hit by the lion, for example. But if you have kind of watched the whole video, thank you very much. I do again recommend reading the WTC Charging Guide. There are some illustrations that also kind of help with understanding some aspects, and I'll see you on the next video.